What's up everybody and welcome to my review of the Black Phone 2. Now before I even get into it, let me just say that my expectations for this movie were really high. The first Black Phone is easily one of my favorite horror films of the 2020s. I love the atmosphere, the emotional storytelling, the performances, everything about it felt fresh and powerful for a modern horror flick. So when a sequel was announced I was both hyped and nervous. Sequels to horror hits can be a mixed bag. Sometimes they expand the world in exciting ways and other times they feel like soulless cash grabs. But I went in with an open mind, hoping this one would deliver. And honestly, while the Black Phone 2 doesn't quite reach the emotional impact and the intensity of the first one, I love this sequel. It's a strong follow-up that manages to respect the original while taking the story in some bold new directions. So let's talk about what this movie is about, without spoilers of course. Set a few years after the terrifying events of the first film, Finney Blake is still haunted by his encounter with the grabber. His younger sister Gwen continues to experience disturbing visions that seem connected to the Black Phone itself. When she begins receiving those mysterious calls again, the siblings find themselves drawn to a winter camp called Alpine Lake, where something dark is lurking beneath the surface. As they dig deeper, Finney and Gwen uncover chunk secrets tied to the grabber's legacy, forcing them to face not just their trauma, but a new supernatural threat that refuses to stay buried. Now let's get into what really works for me in this movie. First off, I love that this isn't just a rehash of the first film's premise. It takes the foundation laid in the Black Phone and builds something fresh on top of it. There's a real sense of world building here. We learn more about the mythos behind the phone, the spirits, and even the town's dark past. The snowy, isolated setting at the camp gives the movie such a chilling atmospheric vibe. It almost feels like The Shining amidst the thing, with this eerie frozen tension hanging in the air. The acting is phenomenal. Mason Thames once again crushes it as Finney. His performance in a certain emotional scene was absolutely outstanding. You can feel the pain, the fear, and the growth from the first movie. Madeleine McRae as Gwen is also fantastic. She brings both vulnerability and strength to her role. You can tell these characters have grown, but are still deeply scarred by what they went through. I also love the time-bending, dreamlike sequences. They gave me Nightmare on Elm Street vibes in the best way possible. I'll admit it might feel like a bit much for some people, but personally, as someone who misses Freddy Krueger and that surreal dream horror style, I was totally on board. The movie balances those moments with grounded emotional scenes, which makes the horror hit even harder. Speaking of horror, the scares in the Black Phone 2 are genuinely fantastic. I'm not usually a huge fan of jump scares because most movies use them as lazy shortcuts for real tension, but here they actually work. Every scare feels earned, perfectly timed, and tied to something that matters in the story. There's always that slow, deliberate build-up before the payoff. You feel the silence stretch just a little too long. That faint hum in the background, that flickering light, and then the scare hits in a way that gets under your skin instead of just startling you. It's the kind of horror that lingers, that stays in your head after the credits roll. The sound design plays a massive part in that. You can feel every creak of the floorboards, every faint whisper from the phone, every echo that bounces off those empty hallways. The audio is layered in a way that builds tension even when nothing is happening on screen, keeping you constantly on edge. Combined with the cinematography, which is moody, cold, and drenched in atmosphere, it captures that same feeling of claustrophobic dread that made the first movie so special. The pacing helps too. It doesn't rush the scares or overload you with them. Instead, it lets the unease simmer, making the big moments hit 10 times harder. And the story itself, it's awesome. This movie doesn't just recycle what worked before, it actually expands the world in meaningful ways, while still keeping the emotional heartbeat of the first movie. You still deeply care about Finney and Gwen, not just because you've seen what they've gone through, but because the film continues to explore how those past horrors has shaped them. It's not just about ghosts and phone calls this time, it's about trauma, healing, and the struggle to move forward when you're still haunted by what's behind you. The supernatural elements are powerful, but they're tied to something very human: grief, guilt, and the fear of never really escaping your pain. It's that emotional layer that makes the Black Phone 2 stand out from so many horror sequels. It's scary, yes, but it's also heartfelt and personal. The movie never forgets that its greatest strength lies not just in the things that go bump in the night, but in the people who are trying to survive them. One thing that really surprised me about The Black Phone 2 is how funny it can be. It's not a full-blown horror comedy by any means, but the humor sprinkled throughout feels natural and genuinely earned. The banter between the characters, especially with Finny and Gwen, adds so much personality and warmth to the movie. Their chemistry feels real, like actual siblings trying to cope with impossible situations by using sarcasm and dark humor as a defense mechanism. Even some of the side characters get a few laugh-out-loud lines that don't undercut the tension but instead make the world feel more alive and human. It's that perfect balance where you can go from laughing at a clever line to holding your breath a minute later, and it all feels smooth. The humor gives the movie a pulse. It breaks up the darkness just enough to make the scary moments hit even harder when they come. Now, it's not perfect. There are a few moments where you can clearly tell the filmmakers borrowed certain beats or elements from the first movie and just repurposed them here. It's not terrible, but it does feel a bit lazy in spots, like they didn't quite know how to fill in every gap, so they leaned on what worked before. Some scenes feel a bit too familiar, like deja vu from the original, but those are small issues in what's otherwise a really impressive sequel. Overall, The Black Phone 2 is a worthy follow-up to one of the best modern horror films of the decade. It's not as groundbreaking as the first, but it's still packed with atmosphere, strong performances, creative visuals, and genuine heart. It takes the story and characters we loved and grows them in a way that feels satisfying and emotional. I highly enjoyed this sequel. Definitely one of my favorite horror movies of the year so far. 9 out of 10. It's chilling, emotional, and smartly done. A great continuation of the Black Phone legacy. So that's my spoiler-free review of The Black Phone 2. What did you guys think of it? Did it live up to your expectations after the first movie, or did you think it fell short? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed the review, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more movie breakdowns and rankings. I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching and take care.